Is it World War III or just the way to stop it? I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, we were gone for about a week. It took a hiatus from making these shows, and a lot has happened in that time. Yep. And I'm going to make a very conscious effort during this episode of Bill Whittle Now to kind of keep this in a non-political kind of realm. I mean, we're dealing with foreign policy. We have the drone strike by the United States against Qassem Soleimani, the Quds force leader of Iran, while he was in Iraq. Since that time, the Iraqi legislature has taken a vote basically asking the United States to withdraw its troops. There was a little bit of a mix-up just before we went to record this. I read that a letter that had been leaked implying that the U.S. forces there had agreed to the pullout was actually an early draft of notification of troop movements and may not necessarily imply that. Bill, the Democrats have suggested that this whole incident with President Trump authorizing the attack against Soleimani may be a way of distracting from his troubles on the domestic front. But again, I think that what I'm hearing from young people these days are heartfelt questions like, is this the beginning of World War III? Are we about to go it alone on something that we didn't even notify our allies about? And there was a brief episode where Twitter kind of exploded with young people who thought that by applying for student loans, they had somehow authorized themselves to be signed up for the Selective Service. And so this, while it may, if you've been around for several decades, it may seem like a tempest in a teapot, and we've seen these kind of things before. For a lot of young people, Bill, this is a serious matter, and for a lot of parents who have young, sons and daughters in the U.S. military, it's a serious matter. First of all, just overall, what do you think of the idea of President Trump authorizing the hit, in essence, what Democrats and some Democrats are calling the assassination, but others are saying taking out a terrorist? What do you think of him authorizing this?
I think it's 100% accurate and appropriate, and I think it is going to do more for the long-term security of the United States than handing them big cargo pallets full of cash.
Now, how do you think that is? Because Soleimani was not only the head of the Quds force, and I believe also the head of the Iranian intelligence forces, but quite a respected, a revered character within, at the very least, within official Iran.
Which has been at war with the United States since 1979. And for those people that say that Donald Trump is starting a war with this action, I would say, well, if that's the case, then I guess we're the ones who bombed or stormed the Iranian embassy in Baghdad. Is that what actually happened?
So you're saying that this is retribution for something that happened in 1979?
No, I'm saying it's retribution for something that happened just a couple days before the strike.
Oh, okay, I see. I'm sorry. So yeah, you're referring to the embassy in Iraq.
Correct. That was under attack by Iranian forces. And now, rather than just leaving those people there to die, we not only backed those people up, now we made it clear to Iran that if you want to play this game with us, for the first time ever, really, since 1979, no, that's not true. Reagan, I think, struck back. But that was against Libya, actually. Look, here's what I'm trying to say, Scott. They are constantly going to be testing American resolve. They do it all the time, and they have escalated from the drone attacks and the attacks on the tankers in the Gulf, which we saw a couple of months ago. Now they actually decided to see if they could get away with the direct attack on the U.S. Embassy, which is an act of war in which they committed in 1979. But who's counting?
Well, the Trump administration isn't really claiming that this is retribution for the crowds that were, stoning and starting fires at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. What they were saying was that Soleimani was hatching plans for a major attack on either U.S. diplomatic installations or personnel, or perhaps some of our allies. And let me ask you a question about this, though, Bill.
Let me just stop you there for a second.
The Trump administration really needed to position it as cutting him off from doing something awful when Soleimani has already got American blood on his hands? Why couldn't they say we're just taking out a terrorist?
Well, this operation didn't happen overnight. This was an operation been planned for a long time. They've been looking for a long time. The fact that they got him a couple days after the Iranians attacked our embassy may have been just sheer coincidence. Maybe it was coincidence because the guy doesn't move around very often, and when he does, he's pretty clandestine about it. The stories I've read has the entire Iranian command structure in an absolute panic, because the only way that we could have had enough information to take this guy out was if we had somebody on the inside, and that seems to be many defense analysts' opinion as well. So now they're looking out over their shoulders, and they're wondering if, when they get into their cars, if a Hellfire missile is going to come off of an unmanned drone and reunite them with Allah. So this is the first time that in my memory, that we have ever hit back at Iran in any meaningful way. All of the IEDs, I think you can say with the thousands that were placed in Iraq during the Iraq War, virtually all of them were manufactured, installed by Iranians. You look back on the last 10 years, and it seems pretty clear to me that if you're going to go in there and have some regime change, the one you really needed to get was the one in Tehran, because this is where all of the world's terrorism comes from. So where all the world's Shiite terrorism comes from anyway. The Sunni terrorism is largely funded by Saudi Arabia. But this man was making plans to kill Americans, whether he was planning to kill Americans on American soil, or whether civilians, or whether he was planning to kill American military personnel overseas. The difference between this president and, let's just say Bill Clinton, is that when this president had a targeting solution on a guy who was already in depth planning to kill Americans, he pulled the trigger, and Bill Clinton called his attorney, which I'm pretty sure was Susan Rice, and was told not to take a shot at Osama bin Laden when Osama bin Laden was in a golf course someplace in, I think it was Afghanistan. Had a chance to take him out, but we didn't. So we paid the price for that inaction, and we paid the price in terms of the perception of weakness. And for people out there who are actually talking about, is this World War III? Hard to imagine World War III with a country that doesn't have, to my knowledge, a single missile that can hit the United States of America. World War III was 25,000 thermonuclear warheads on either side going across the Atlantic Ocean. World War III is dealing with China or Russia in a full-on nuclear exchange. That's World War III.
Well, I think we're quibbling about terms when it comes to that. But can I back up for a second, Bill?
No,
Bill,
hold on.
You're taking it off to another topic that I don't want to get into yet.
All right, I'll get to that in a minute. But you did mention that young people are saying that they're considering this World War III. So let me just address that issue.
You're arguing semantics. You know what young people mean. They don't mean that there's some literal definition of World War III, and this doesn't meet the literal definition. They're meaning the United States is going to go to war in a major way, and that means young people will provide the cannon fodder if that should happen.
Okay, so was it? Well, first of all, let's just get rid of that ridiculous assumption right off the bat. Anybody who's going to get killed in an all-out shooting war with the United States are going to be people who volunteered for the job out of patriotism. So if we're talking about a bunch of kids who are worried about whether they're going to get drawn into this thing, relax. Better people than you are already on the job. Now, with that out of the way, if you're telling me that World War III is any shooting war of any degree of seriousness, serious kinetic action, then that would mean that the Iraq War was World War III. And so was the Afghan invasion. That was World War III. Gulf War was World War III. So if you're not ready to understand that World War III has a definition apart from being at war with some country someplace,
Bill, do you understand
the
concern at all? Because it just seems like you're debating what World War III means. Do you understand how a young person seeing this could think, wow, Iran hates us. They've got a big military. We've got a lot of troops in the Middle East. Eventually, it may come to a draft or come to having more troops in there. Can you not understand at all how a young person could be concerned about this?
I have a hard time imagining, I really do, having a hard time imagining somebody old enough to be concerned about this being that badly misinformed about how things work in the world. I really find it quite shocking that people could be out there thinking, my God, maybe I'm going to be drafted and sent over to fight in Iran. All I'll tell you is this: if this has finally got people's attention on it, then that's another benefit. You know, this is the world. This is the actual world that we live in. We didn't launch these attacks on the Iranian embassy. They launched their attacks on us. We don't have plans to go into Iran and kill Iranian personnel. We could do that overnight and basically take the entire military out in one evening if we wanted to, but we don't. So the question is, who's killing who and who's planning to kill who? And if it turns out that they're planning to kill us, the people, who actually signed up on the dotted line, actually went to serve their country, those people, the people who are actually at risk in a shooting war, the ones who volunteered, if those people are at risk and the president pulls a trigger on the guy who's planning these operations and turns him into atoms, this is somehow a bad thing for the country?
So let me get back to my question before then, Bill, on this particular point. What mystifies me a bit is the Trump administration's justification for the hit. Because it seems to me that if you have long ago declared a nation to be a state sponsor of terrorism, in fact, the state sponsor of terrorism, the leading one in the world, and you've got a guy who's the head of the Quds force, essentially the terrorist in chief of this terrorist sponsoring nation, why would you even have to suggest that the reason you took him out is because he was planning future attacks? Couldn't you just say, look, we took out bin Laden because he had killed a bunch of Americans. We took out al-Baghdadi. We take out terrorist leaders. Why didn't the Trump administration go with that and say, hey, this guy wandered outside of his neighborhood, came into Iraq. What good could he possibly be doing there? But we've been looking to kill this guy for years and we finally got a chance. Why not say that? Or is it just because they're afraid of the world's opprobrium against a state-sponsored assassination?
Let me see if I can make this clear for you. A person who already has the blood of thousands of Americans, when I say blood, I mean the death of thousands of Americans on his hands for the work that he did against the United States in Iraq, has already committed enough of a crime, in my opinion, to warrant a military strike.
My point exactly.
Okay, so now if you're telling me why doesn't Donald Trump just simply came out and say we killed him because he did some bad things, I think you'd have to turn to the left-wing media and ask them that question. Because to me, if you're going to go face this headwind that's being projected, you not only have to show that the guy was worthy of having been killed for the things he's done, you also have to show that he's planning to do some more bad things. That's the court of public opinion. That's the world we live in. I don't think any justification is needed to take out a uniformed official of a country who is attacking Americans and killing them in 4,000 of them in Iraq. I don't think you need authorization for a guy who's wearing a uniform in a case like that. A great example of this, by the way, and I saw this is not my, I was pleased to see the analogy, although it certainly wasn't mine, was the hit on Yamamoto, the admiral who planned the Japanese mastermind who planned the attack on Pearl Harbor. In the middle of the war, we had intercepted radio communications. He was going to be visiting one of his outer Pacific Rim bases, and we realized that P-38 Lightnings had just enough fuel to fly the thousands of miles to get there if they arrived on time and on the clock, and they did, and they took this admiral who was in an unarmed transport plane and shot him out of the sky and sent him into a fireball in the jungle. And it was not only the right thing to do from a military point of view, but as the man who was the architect of 3,000 Americans being killed on December 7th, 1941, if that's not justification enough for you, then I'm sorry, you don't belong in this world. You do not belong in the real world. And you don't have a right to not be in the real world either,
So do you think
the
the Trump administration made a mistake by not putting stronger emphasis on the previous acts of this guy and instead going to suggest that we had to kill him now because he was planning something bad?
All of this is public relations. All of this is public relations and press releases and optics and all the rest. There's only one thing that actually matters here, and that is that Donald Trump, as president of the United States, had the opportunity to remove a leading general of a nation that's been at war with this country for 40 years. And unlike some other people who we can talk about, he decided to pull the trigger against America's enemies. And that, to me, is justification enough. And to the degree that we're going to try and finesse this, was it legal? Was it moral? Was it this? You don't belong in the real world. You don't belong here. And I'm sorry if I have to be the person to break that to you, but nevertheless, reality will be here whether I tell you about it or not. This is not up to me. I didn't start this. I'm just telling those people who can't say, oh my God, or how could you possibly say this? This is the world, okay? And the people who volunteer to defend this country against the world are fully aware of the risks that they're taking, 100% aware of the risks that they're taking, and they take them anyway. And so I am not going to be in a position where I say, gee, I really feel sorry for people who think that they're going to be drafted to go fight in Iran. I'm more concerned about the people who are already in uniform, who are already on the line, whose lives were saved by an action taken by this president, which to me is a no-brainer. Absolutely not. And to the degree that that the timing is concerned, look, that's like saying, well, we decided to get bin Laden the day we decided to get him. You have a chance to find out where these people are, and it's constantly in motion. And I might point out, by the way, for the benefit of those hundreds of thousands of liberals who watch this show, I might point out that on numerous occasions in the past, including this one, very nearly, that airstrike was called off because there were civilians in the vicinity. So in this case, you had this guy and you had the leader of the Iraqi coalition with Iran in the same place at the same time. And my only hope is that he was in the second car and not the first one.
Final question for you. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has said that that the Congress would move to pass legislation limiting President Trump's ability to act in this, citing the war powers held constitutionally by the U.S. Congress. At what point do you think the President of the United States would be obligated to go to Congress and ask for a declaration of war? President Trump seemed to suggest that he would keep Congress informed, although they complain they have not been well informed, but he would keep them informed through the media. Do you think, as a conservative, that a president of the United States has a constitutional obligation to go to Congress if this thing should escalate, if we would have to get into another response because Iran had responded? If
we are talking about ongoing full-scale operations, then as a constitutionalist, I would prefer to see a declaration of war. But I have to tell you, I think that horse has left the barn in the 60s. So first things first, it's not the Speaker of the House of Representatives who is the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the United States. Nancy Pelosi might want to crack out that Constitution that she's never read once in her life, I'm quite sure. But look up the part about who in the government is in charge of the military, and you'll find it's not the Speaker of the House of Representatives, it's the President of the United States of America. Nancy Pelosi has also said that she's not only going to run the presidency, she's also going to run the Senate. She has declared that she's not going to turn in these articles of impeachment until she's satisfied that the Senate will do things the way she wants them to. Nancy, you don't run the Senate, and you're not the President of the United States. You're the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and I suspect you're going to be out of a job in just a few months.
But she's not completely outside of her bailiwick to suggest that it's Congress's duty to make a declaration of war.
Look, this, Scott, if sending a missile after two automobiles is a declaration of war, then
this was not a hit on a used car dealership, Bill, and you know it.
Right. It was not. It was a response to actions taken by this guy in response to plans that this guy has. Look, Scotty, this question is a moot point, and to get into it and try and finesse it and try and lawyer it up is to do everything possible to make sure that nobody actually understands what's going on. Okay? What actually going on is in 1979, the Iranian government, the current Iranian government, direct descendants of that government, overran the American embassy in Tehran in 1979, took American hostages for 444 days and kept them until Ronald Reagan was elected, or inaugurated, I should say, and then they said, maybe we shouldn't mess around with this guy. So already my case is proven, and this has been going on. Almost all of the deaths caused in the Iraq War were caused by IEDs, and those IEDs were designed, manufactured, and planted by Iranians. And I'm sick and tired of having myself try to be dealing with a country that is not going to admit it's at war with a country that's at war with us. It's about time these people understood who they're dealing with. It's about time they understood who they're dealing with. And when you send pallets of money, as Barack Obama did, when you put $500 million in cash on a cargo pallet and fly it to people whose openly stated purpose is to kill every American they can get their hands on, then you obviously are going to have to take some pretty extreme steps to make it clear to these murderers that this is not the same dog and pony show that they're used to.
Well, Bill, you seem to be making Nancy Pelosi's point, because what she's saying is if Iran has declared war on us, which you just said they did years ago, that the president of the United States, if he wants to engage in that war, needs to go to Congress and ask for a declaration, no?
I'll tell you what. How about if Donald Trump sends the declaration of war request over to Nancy Pelosi when she turns over the declaration, the articles of impeachment to the Senate? How about that for a deal?
Ladies and gentlemen, we are grateful to the members at BillWhittle.com who have made it possible for us to conduct these vigorous discussions, and the members themselves.
Please don't take it out on Scott. We pay Scott. We pay Scott good money to act this role. He's a patriot. It hurts him as much to say those things as it hurts you to listen to it.
And speaking of patriots, by the way, the Patriot Post and our buddies over there, America's News Digest, have contributed also to this event and have made it possible for you to see this. And we are going to put a link below to the Patriot Post so you can check them out. If you're not yet a member at BillWhittle.com, we invite you to become so by going to BillWhittle.com and clicking that Become a Member link. And for those of you who'd like to see this kind of a conversation happen in real time and have a chance to interact with a host, well, you can do that from May 15th to 18th aboard the Royal Caribbean Navigator of the Seas as we go on a Caribbean cruise. You can find out more about that Caribbean cruise and sign up for it at BillWhittle.com as well.
And if you think you're thinking, maybe I don't want to go because I don't know anybody, you're wrong. You know everybody. Every single person on that ship, on that cruise with us is going to be your close friend by the time we come back to port 3 days later. These are your friends, you just haven't met them yet. I guarantee you that's how it's going to feel out there at sea.
Well, and Bill and I and Stephen Green and our spouses look forward to meeting you as well. So for Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.